Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Woo, slight technical glitch there, but here I am. My name is Luan and I am joining you from the beautiful Cape Town, South Africa. So as usual, in these webinars, I would love to hear who you are and where you're from. And I already see the names and locations coming into the chat. So please keep doing that. And I'll say hi in a little bit while I tell you a little bit about myself and also what's going to happen today. So I've been a teacher for over 15 years, and I'm so excited to spend the next hour with you. So yes, as those names come in, I'll be saying hello in a second. So just to let you know that about half of today's 1 hour session, so that would be about 30 minutes, I will be presenting to you, telling you all about the topic, just talking you through this topic. And the second half is going to be a Q&A. And I'd encourage you to please hold off on typing your questions until we get to the Q&A section, because if you send them earlier while I'm presenting, I might miss them and not get a chance to respond. Also, just a heads up that I will be answering questions related to today's topic only. So let's see who we've got here today. Goodness me, the visitors have just come in. So we've got hello from Italy. Welcome to you. Pakistan, England, Virginia, USA. Amazing. Another person from Italy. Hello to you. Pennsylvania, USA, South Africa, Finland, England. Another South African. Oh, wow. Okay, so that's amazing. I'm very, very happy to see you all. All right, so as I told you, today's topic is very specific, and I will be answering questions about halfway through, only based on today's topic. So please, if you think of something that you'd like to ask me a little later on, jot it down, make a note of it, so that later on when I say Q&A, you're ready with your questions and you can type them in, because I'm sure you'll have some questions. So let's get straight into it, right? So today's topic is all about level 5 assignment C. So for lots of you, this is the very last assignment in your course. And this assignment is quite interesting to do because it takes a lot of creativity. It is really a culmination of the entire course and what you've learned and what you've acquired through the course. And this assignment really just assesses your ability to put things together and to create something. So if you work for a language school or a normal school or just an institution where English is taught, right? Very often you'll be given a course book, and the course book will have activities ready-made for you. Also, many schools have prescribed curriculums that you've got to stick to, and these often include activities that, once again, are ready-made for you. But what we're trying to do is to help you design your own activities and to find your own materials, so that if you're ever in the position where you actually have to find your own stuff, that you're able to do so. And that's exactly what this assignment is all about. And that's why I mentioned to you a little bit earlier on that it's all about your creativity plus what you've learned along the course. Right, so let's have a look at what the assignment assesses. So in assignment C, we'll be looking at the evaluation of a textbook. And this is written in an essay form. So if you've gone to a restaurant or a movie and you write about your experience, we would call it a review. But because you've not essentially used this textbook or the course book just yet, we'll be giving you samples and you'll be writing an evaluation in essay form. The very next point that we're going to be assessing in the assignment is the selection of an authentic text, the selection of authentic material. So we'll be looking a little bit at what an authentic text or material is, and also how and where you can find it, and then also how to create your own follow-up activities. Remember, when we introduce a text to our class, it's usually for a comprehension lesson, like a reading lesson, or listening lesson for a listening material. So we introduce it for the purpose of comprehension, where they get given comprehension questions and so on. But what we're asking you to do is design 3 follow-up activities that you can further use that text for a group of advanced adult students. We do ask you for a second essay, and this is where you've got to motivate your choice of text and also explain the rationale behind the tasks you've decided to design, those 3 follow-up tasks that I mentioned just a little bit earlier. And then finally, yes, you've got to include a bibliography. This is a legal and course requirement, so it is important. Even if most of what you've done is creating your own work, of course, you've used sites to help you put this together. You've used resources for research, and that's what would go into the bibliography. So let's take a look at these step by step so that by the end of this webinar, it really will clarify all those instructions for assignment C. So just a reminder, this is the level 5 course, assignment C. This is not level 3. Those are 2 different courses with 2 different assignment expectations. So if you are on the level 3 course, this assignment will not be relevant to you. The content itself might be very useful going forward, but when it comes to assignments, this is not for you. But please stay, please watch, you'll learn a lot. All right, so let's first have a look at the evaluation of the textbook. So that's the very first part of the assignment, right? So the chapter and the scope or the index, these are provided on the instructions page. So lots of students tend to send us messages and say, well, where is the sample? Don't stress. It's right there on the instructions page along with your template, with your main template. And what you've got to do with these samples is you've got to write an essay to evaluate the suitability of this course book for a class of advanced students. So we know that it's just a sample, but the sample covers a lot of what the course book represents, what it gives to your students, and the kind of support it gives to you as a teacher. So you will be able to comment quite a lot on what the course book entails and how valuable you think it might be. So as a teacher, going forward, in future, you might have to select a course book or a textbook. So this evaluation is really good practice for what to look out for, what to avoid. We give you a checklist for the evaluation. And the questions listed are really guidelines for the evaluation. And remember, there is no perfect textbook or course book. So a teacher needs to decide what would work best for the course aims, for the group of students they're teaching, and so forth. And the scope and the sequence included for review helps with evaluating the development of language, skills, and so forth. So when you open up that sample, really try to look at it from a teacher and a student's perspective. As a teacher, would you be able to use this? As a student, would you enjoy using a course book of this kind? So that's what you've got to use the sample for. And just a reminder, if you've just joined, the sample for the course book is right there on the instructions page of the assignment. Right, so let's move on, and we are still on the evaluation of the textbook. Right, so something that you've got to look out for, and some of the questions that get given to you to consider when evaluating this course book is the material clearly structured and ordered in a logical sequence? Are the materials appropriately graded? That would be from a language perspective, right? Is this okay for an advanced class, in other words? Is there plenty of practice, recycling, and revision of new target language? And remember, when we say target language, we refer to whatever you're teaching them, the content you're teaching them in a particular lesson. Is there a teacher's book with answers and extra resources? And if the sample itself doesn't provide these answers, of course, you're welcome to do some external research. That's what it's all about, right? Also, does it provide exercises that students can do independently? Is there the opportunity for pair work and group work? And also, is the material attractively and clearly presented? Me, for example, something I look out for in a course book is clutter. Right? I don't like clutter. And this, pages are overly full and there are too many graphics, and the graphics are sort of loaded with text, and behind the text, there's another graphic. For me, that's a lot, right? So that's something I definitely look out for when I look at how clearly everything is laid out and presented. So that's something you should pay attention to as well, right? Something else to look out for when doing the evaluation of your course book. is there a balance of the four skills? Now, remember, that's listening, reading, writing, and speaking, right? But are there also other language areas that get sufficient cover, like vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation? Are there opportunities for practice for all those aspects of language? Is there an interesting range of different activities? Because remember, students tend to act out or become complacent when everything is too repetitive. Is there variety in this book? Are there listening and reading texts available, and are they interesting? Are they authentic looking and sounding? They are not authentic once they're in that course book, but do they look authentic? Do they look like something that your students will see outside of the classroom, right? Is the material culturally appropriate? Think about where you're going to be and what's presented in the book. And is it appropriate for the cultural environment that you've got going there? Will students be able to afford the book? The price might not be in the sample. So again, teachers, this is some external research that you've got to do. Find out what the book is going for, and will your students be able to afford it? Think about grammar reference pages, vocabulary lists. Are they provided in this course book? So see, there's a lot you can comment on. But when I get to the end of this list, we're going to talk about the fact that in your evaluation, you do not have to cover all these points. Now, remember, we went through a previous slide of points to look out for and the slide, right? You don't have to cover everything in your evaluation. There is a particular word limit for your evaluation. So just choose a few of these points that you'd like to write about, that you'd like to expand on. And then something important to remember is that by the end of this process, you will need to say whether you would like to use this book in a real classroom setting or not. So that's your final paragraph, your conclusion. And basically, yes, you've got to say whether you approve or disapprove of this book. And that is section 1 of the assignment, the evaluation of a course book or textbook sample. And remember, I'm going to remind you of this consistently throughout this webinar. The sample is available on the assignment page right at the bottom with your template. Right, so that is the evaluation done. But remember that this webinar will be available very, very soon. So if you've missed anything, or if you arrived a little late, or if you didn't get to take a note down and you don't want to ask me about it later on during Q&A, you can absolutely rewatch this webinar because that's a lot to take in. Right, so section 2, probably my favorite part, and that is where you've got to select an authentic text. But before we look at the authentic text, right, let's look at who you are selecting this text for, right? So you've got here a class of C1, C2 students. So that's a very high level class. That's advanced, borderline, proficient, right? And remember that proficiency level speakers are in your class because either they want to move to another country, study at an English speaking university, apply for a job where they've got to speak English and they've got to prove their English level. And that's very often why they are doing a proficiency level course. So in this class, you've got to picture it now, a group of advanced students, all adults, C1, C2 level, mixed nationality. So different walks of life, different backgrounds. Oh, the best classes to have, right? And it's also a general English class of about 15 adults. We're looking at 9 women, 6 men, ages 20 to 40 years. And they're living and studying in the English-speaking country where you are teaching, right? So that's the hypothetical situation there. And something very important to remember is that when you choose a piece of text for these students, remember, you are getting the text from an external source, like a news site or blog, or a cooking site or a historical site. You're getting it from there, not from a course book. So you don't have that safety net to go with. Your text must be appropriate for all students in the group. So no racism, sexism, violence, that sort of thing. Think about the fact that what you find okay, a student in your class might not. Maybe they've experienced some kind of violence. Maybe they've experienced some kind of racism sexism, and you don't want to introduce that into the classroom. And that's not to say that these mainstream topics have no place, but I would rather give my students the freedom of discussing those outside of the class over a cup of coffee than in the actual classroom. Focus on learning English and make the content informative, interesting, creative, and neutral, right? That's the key word there. All right, so let's move on. So that is all about the authentic text, but I'm not going to leave you there. Of course, I'm going to give you more advice on an authentic text, right? So also something that you've got to remember when you're selecting your text is the nitty-gritty. Like, look at who your students are. So in this particular group, we've been quite specific, right? We've said to you that 4 of your students have university places and they want to improve their English for this purpose. 2 people are married to people from the country where you're teaching. 1 is at home with a young child and the other works in a restaurant. 4 are colleagues sent by their company to work in this country for a year. Oh goodness, this sounds like my class, literally. And there are 5 short-term students as well. So you can see you've got a wide variety of interests, motivation, backgrounds, cultures, religions, possibly a really, really mixed pot. And like I said, those are the best classes, right? So that is the description of the group. So now, if you think about it, that's a lot to take in. So you've got to choose a relevant text for this particular group. You've got to choose something that really, really works for them. Can you think of any topics right now in this webinar, live? Can you think of any topics that would be suitable for a mixed group like this? If you can think of any, type them in the chat or just brainstorm by yourself. Think about topics that you think would be good to introduce to a mixed group like this. And remember, keep it neutral, keep it interesting, maybe even a little bit of fun, but make sure that it doesn't offend anyone, right? So think of a few topics that you would comfortably introduce to a group like this. So remember that when it comes to materials, what we're asking for in this assignment is authentic materials, right? So authentic materials are materials like reading texts that mother tongue speakers would use in their everyday real world context, right? So authentic materials are not created for the classroom. They are not written for a course book. They're not written for an English teaching site. They're not written for English learning purposes at all, right? These texts, these authentic materials really enable our students to immerse themselves in the language. And examples would be news articles, blogs. I love going to sites like history.com, National Geographic, all these sites where you can find just good reading content, right? News sites as well. And very often you find those news sites and they've got on the news site itself, there's a lifestyle section, there's a travel section, there's a food section, there's a culture section, sights and sounds section. So there's a lot, even on one news site, that will be 100% acceptable as authentic material. So you know what? A lot of our students say, but where do I start, right? I do believe that when it comes to authentic material, just go to the news sites, go to sites that you would look at just to find interesting bits and pieces to read. So that's where you get started with your authentic material. All right, now we've also got to explore non-authentic material. And just as a reminder, non-authentic material is all to do with what's specifically been designed for textbooks, for classroom use on those English learning sites when they give you a nice text to introduce to your class. That's been written and that's been created for a classroom setting, so that would not be regarded as authentic material. So non-authentic material, anything that has been designed specifically for the process of teaching English. So your worksheets, your textbooks, your language apps, what websites and so forth. So steer clear of those, because that there will not be accepted in the assignment. All right. I see some comments coming in, but remember, if you've got questions or suggestions for authentic material, that sort of thing, please save them and type them a little bit later on so that we don't miss them at all. Right, so once you've selected your piece of authentic material, right, we also want you to look at the material and see, right, which words in this material or in this text would I need to pre-teach my students so that they can just enjoy the process of reading? So those words that are at or above their level, preferably above, but also think about collocations and phrases, because if you remember about a phrase or a collocation is that sometimes the individual words that make up that phrase are relatively low, right? But the meaning of that phrase is very often idiomatic or non-literal, and that would have to be taught also. So think about that, because we want you to select 12 items of vocabulary out of the text that you have chosen that you think would be necessary to pre-teach to your class. We're not asking you to pre-teach. We're not asking you to show us how you would pre-teach. We're not asking you to create a vocabulary task to pre-teach. None of that. Just in the text that you've submitted, highlight or list below the text the vocabulary items that you think would be necessary to pre-teach. Right. Now, after pre-teaching your 12 vocabulary items, the next part of section 2 is where you've got to create activities, right? And what activities we're looking at here is a dictionary skills task, an online activity, and also a follow-on activity. And these activities, they should be challenging and engaging. And also remember, something very much important in this particular assignment is that there is no AI permitted. Right, so we've got to look at a kind of text that can be further extended into these activities. And as mentioned, it's a dictionary task, an online activity, and a third follow-on task, right? Activities should be challenging and engaging, because remember, you've got advanced learners, and also no AI is permitted. All right. So that is the authentic text and also an introduction to the 3 activities. Also reminding you that your 12 vocabulary items must be highlighted within the text, or if you're afraid that highlighting might get scrapped during the upload, simply list your pre-teach items below the text. Right, so now we're going to be looking at the 3 follow-up activities. Just a little reminder, please not to type your questions now, as I'm afraid I will miss them. Please save your questions for when I open up Q&A. So if you've typed a question already, just copy it, hold on to it, and paste it a little bit later on so that I don't miss your question. All right, so now let's look at those 3 follow-on activities. So remember, you've chosen a nice text. You've decided which 12 items you would hypothetically pre-teach in that text. And now you're ready to create activities, exhausting that piece of text, right? So the very first thing, when looking at your 3 activities, we've got the template there with all the information for you to fill in. There is a section called Teacher's Instructions. And the teacher's instructions are not what the students will have to do and not what the teacher is going to say, but what the teacher is meant to be doing. How must the teacher set up this task? How must the teacher monitor this task? And how must the teacher consolidate this task? Because remember, when we create activities for ourselves, we're also creating them for other teachers in case they want to do these activities with their classes. So the teacher instructions must be really, really clear. They must tell the other teacher exactly what to do. For example, divide the class into an even number of groups, give half the handouts to group A, half the handouts to group B. Whatever the instructions are, you type them here, so that it also gives your marker the opportunity to really visualize the task and see how it's going to play out in a real classroom. And also, your instructions must be detailed enough, as mentioned earlier, for another teacher to take over the class and facilitate the activity successfully. So teacher instructions are written. Imagine as you write them that you're writing them instructing another teacher how to do this activity with their class. Right. So the very first activity that we're going to be looking at is the dictionary task, right? So one would think that the dictionary activity is just purely for vocabulary, but also we want our students to work with the dictionary. And you might think, oh, well, it's so easy. You just look up a word, it tells you what the word means. But remember, that's for you and me. But for our students who are learning English, well, the dictionary is an academic tool that they have to get used to, right? So the dictionary activity must allow them to practice whatever vocabulary you've chosen. It can be vocabulary from your authentic text. It can be the 12 items that you've chosen. I tend to work with a different set of vocabulary in the dictionary task because remember, I've already pre-taught the 12 items. So maybe some other words within the text, but it needs to be linked to the authentic text. And again, when you give the students instructions, these must be clear. Tell them what to look for in the dictionary task. Don't just tell them to open the dictionary and look up the word. What must they look up about this word? Are they looking for meaning? Are they looking for form, pronunciation? Are they looking for synonyms, antonyms, word families, or all of that, right? And include a worksheet. If the instructions are quite lengthy, include a worksheet. This also gives us the opportunity to see that you can create worksheets and that your instructions are simple enough for students to follow. So that there is the dictionary task. The very next task is the online task. And something important to note with the online task is that it shouldn't be another reading or listening task. Remember, your students have hypothetically done that already. They've already used the text that you've given them in a comprehension lesson of some kind. So the online task really should give them the opportunity to research the topic in the text, perhaps, right? So in the online task, you've got to provide a worksheet. You've got to provide suggested websites for them to start with. Google is not a website per se, it's a search engine. So it's got to be specific websites related to the topic that they're researching. And also remember, you've got to reference these sites, right? And an example would be if the authentic text, for example, your topic is travel, your students could use a few sites that you've given them to plan a trip. Or they can research other holiday destinations. If your topic is wellness, they could maybe find alternative exercises that they can do. They can find the gyms in the local area. They can find, videos online that show you how to do the exercise. So there's lots that you can do with a topic, especially if it's a well-chosen topic and something that you can extend into these tasks, right? Also, the questions should be quite challenging, not just yes or no. Really allow them to apply their critical thinking skills and write a couple of sentences per answer. They've really got to collate the information from several sources. But remember, you've got to give them those example websites that they're meant to use. Otherwise, students just sort of go down the rabbit hole looking for various sites when in fact your few sites could get them started. And also your websites that you give them shows them what sort of sites they're meant to look at. And also very often while they're exploring a site that you've given them, on that site, they might find links to other helpful sites. So please put these sites on the worksheet that you actually create. And remember, for the online activity, yes, you must create a worksheet. Remember, the teacher instructions are for another teacher to do, but your worksheets should all have a clear set of instructions for the students to follow also. Right, and then we get to the final task, and that is the follow-on it's a speaking task, right? And these are activities that you can do after you've used the text for a comprehension lesson. So really, this task should give students the opportunity to verbally respond to the text, to the material with their ideas, their thoughts, their experiences, that sort of thing, right? So think about your role plays, your debates, your discussions. And remember, there's a short section in Unit 5 on what follow on activities entail, right? And also think about something that's really going to get your students talking. And remember that in the activity itself, we ask you to provide speaking prompts. Now, what we mean here is that if you have a topic, no matter how clear your topic is, your students need speaking prompts, even advanced students, right? They need to get that introduction to a speaking activity. So I would give them, if I've chosen a discussion, I would go with 6 to 8 discussion questions. So if my topic is travel, what do you think about the destinations mentioned in the text? Which of those would you like to visit and why? What are your thoughts on ecotourism? Have you got any similar sites in your town or your city? And if you were planning a trip, what sort of activities would you suggest for the members of your group? So those are speaking prompts, right? And that immediately gets students talking. A role play would be you're assigning each student a role and a scenario, and you then got to create those 6 to 8 roles and scenarios for your students to act out. But either way, you can't just say to a student, speak about the topic. You've got to give them the prompts. And we specifically ask for about 6 to 8 speaking prompts. All right. Please remember that I will not be answering questions right now. You've got to save those questions and type them in later on. I am missing all the questions that are scrolling up at the moment and I will not see them. So please save your questions and type them later when I open up Q&A. Just a reminder. All right. And then the final part, well, almost the final part of the assignment is your second essay, right? And here we're really asking you to explain yourself. So explain what you think the benefits of authentic text is, or are, and also why did you choose your text and your activities? We've given you a template, we've given you the headings of each paragraph that you've got to fill in, and you've basically got to do a full word count that doesn't exceed 700 words for the full essay, not per paragraph, right? Use full sentences, not bullet point, write in cohesive sentences and paragraphs, and also proofread your work before you submit. Right, so it's the final essay, word count total not to exceed 700 words, and it's all about justifying your choices and also writing your thoughts on what you feel the uses of authentic materials in the classroom are, and also tools like the internet and how useful or not so useful they might be. So the essay very clearly instructs you on what to write, how to write it, and how many words you must not exceed. So that's the essay. And then the final part, so this is the final part, and it's the bibliography. So remember earlier I said to you, this is a legal and course requirement. You've got to reference any text, any visuals, any websites, any course units that you've used from our course in the assignment. You've got to reference it. Now, if you've forgotten how to reference something, in the assessment handbook, there is a section on referencing, and you can just simply go there and use the format to reference. If you can't find that, send us a message to tutor support, and we will happily tell you exactly how to reference your work. We cannot just accept a link and a date. It's got to be more substantial than that. Also remember that you've got to provide in your bibliography a link to your authentic text. We should be able to click on the link and be taken straight to your authentic text and see it in its natural habitat and see it in its original source, so that we can actually verify that your text is in fact authentic. If we cannot access your text by clicking on the link, you will be asked to resubmit with a valid link. Your marker must be able to access your original text. So not just the text you've copied and pasted into your authentic text template, but also the link in the bibliography. Something important to remember is our copy leaks AI and plagiarism check. all assignments, once you're ready to upload, your assignment will be automatically scanned for plagiarism and for AI. But here is something very important to remember. When you submit your authentic text, you're going to get a very high plagiarism score. And that's normal, right? Because the authentic text we know is taken from another source, like a news article or a blog. So obviously it's going to scan a very high plagiarism count. So for the authentic text file, please pay attention to this. For the authentic text file, if you get a very high score, possibly 100% if you've used the whole article, that is okay. Don't panic. As long as the AI score is not high, and as long as your plagiarism and AI scores of your main templates are below 30%. So let me just summarize that. Your authentic text file will have a high plagiarism score. That's okay. That's almost expected, right? Your main template should not have a high plagiarism nor a high AI score. That should be below 30%. Also, your authentic text file should only be high in plagiarism, not high in AI. So no AI across the board, but just to reiterate, authentic text will automatically have a high plagiarism. I always say the higher the plagiarism on the authentic text, the better, because it means your text is 100% authentic. So don't panic if you see that, please. All right. And also remember that we're here at Tutor Support and we're ready to answer questions, right? So if you have any questions about the assignment, about the instructions, please ask us. We don't want you to sit there for hours and hours and hours and days gone by not knowing what to do when we could just have answered your question in 30 seconds, right? So please ask. Please do remember, though, that we will not be able to preview any work. We will not be able to tell you that your file, your authentic text is okay. What we can do is check whether it's authentic or not, but we will not be able to check whether it's okay for the class you've been assigned, because that's part of the grading criteria. So say, for example, you get a funny high AI reading for a text that is 100% authentic, of course, send it to us and we will check that for you. But we will not be able to preview, pre-approve, or pre-scan any work that you're iffy about submitting. That we will not be able to do. But yes, please ask questions. We do not want you to sit there not knowing what to do. We can hold your hand through this and we can help you with absolutely everything. All right. So, ladies, gentlemen, everyone, now it's time to type those questions in that you've been sitting on, that you've been thinking about. Please start typing your questions into the chat right now, because now is the time that I'm going to read them and answer them. So I'll expect a few questions to be coming in very soon. So if you typed your question ages ago, please retype it, because I will not be able to go back and just scroll through all the questions earlier. As I did ask, please to put your questions in now. And I thank you. I see them coming through right now. All right. So let's see. We've got a couple of questions. Would an article on the upcoming Summer Olympics in Los Angeles be, let's actually put that one on the board, right? So such a teacher, on the board, on the screen. Would an article on the upcoming Summer Olympics in Los Angeles be a good option for an authentic text? Absolutely. If it comes from a site like a news site or a sports site or a lifestyle site, absolutely. However, if it comes from an English learning site, then no, then it's been graded. So yes, that sounds like a lot of fun. And remember, think about the group you've got, adults from all walks of life, something really cultural, something really, really interesting. All right, so good choice. And then we have another question. Is it possible to have the slides about the assignment webinars? No, the webinars are not available in slides, but Ida, you can rewatch this webinar as many times as you need to, right? So today's webinar will be available in a couple of days. By Monday latest, this webinar, Tuesday, okay, maybe Tuesday latest, this webinar will be available, and you will absolutely be able to rewatch as many times as you need to. All right, so the questions are coming in fast and furious. Okay, great question. Thanks, James. I struggle with assessing time involved for various activities. If you have 15 advanced students, how much time should you give each student for a speaking activity? Okay, so James, I need you to get your mind out of the 2 minutes each scenario, right? Because speaking activities are not where each student produces something for 2 minutes and then you move on to the next student. That's not it, right? So a speaking activity would maybe be a group discussion. Okay, so say, for example, your topic is the Olympics and you've got a group discussion based on a text that you used, and you've got discussion questions like, which is your favorite event? Did you play any sports as a child? How does your country celebrate the Olympics when it happens? So various questions like that. And you would basically either project those questions on the board, James, or you'd put them on a little worksheet and you'd give each group a set of questions and you'd assign 10 minutes or 8 minutes and say, right, speak, using the questions one by one. And they speak, James, you monitor, you facilitate, but those groups are actively engaging in conversation. And your job at this point is just to monitor and also to quietly and secretly note down some errors that they're making, little mistakes that they've made, because later on in your feedback, you can maybe put some of the mistakes up on the board and say, right, so let's just do some correction later on, right? It doesn't have to be included in the assignment. All I'm saying is that a speaking task should really be student to student or groups at a time. If it's a role play, you would write the roles of each student. Maybe the one is an Olympic swimmer and the other one is a journalist, and they've got to maybe have this little interview, and 4 minutes in, they need to swap roles. So James, think about blocks of speaking time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Very often, if a speaking activity is 20 minutes long, we break it up into two. Maybe the first part is a role play, maybe the second part is a discussion. But yeah, I would say don't work so much on the 2 minutes per student. Think about a 15-minute speaking time, 2 minutes for instructions, 2 minutes for consolidation, and the rest of the time, students just get to sit in those groups and chat. Right, does that help? I hope so. All right, and then some more questions have come in. Right, let's see. Okay, some other topics about age and level. Okay, we're going to move on from those. Okay, let's see. There's a question here from Crystal. My question is, would we be penalized in our assignments if words are spelled using American spelling, like color without the U versus British color with? No, not in the assignments, you will not. But what I am going to suggest is that if you've chosen American spelling, keep it consistent throughout your assignment. If you've chosen British spelling, keep it consistent, because when you present activities to students and you're mixing that up a little bit, your students might get a little bit confused, right? So same goes for your assignments. Just make sure that everything is consistent. So Crystal, if you're happy to work with American spelling, just keep that going throughout the assignment and you will be a-okay. All right, so Michael, let's see, has asked for an example of a follow-on task. I've given a couple, like the discussion with about 6 to 8 discussion questions. It could be an interview with a few questions for the interviewer to ask. It could be a role play where you assign roles and scenarios. Yeah, there's a lot that you can do. It can be storytelling, a narrative of some kind where your students share stories about experiences that are related to the topic of the text. So those are all follow-on tasks that you need to think about. But also remember that we ask you for the 6 to 8 speaking prompts, like discussion questions, 6 to 8 roles and scenarios that they will be playing, just so that students know where to start. Right? Michael, have you ever been put in a situation where someone has just said to you, right, here's the topic, speak? If you haven't, I'm happy for you because that's awful, right? And if you have, you'll know that you feel a bit like a deer in the headlights, right? So you won't know where to start. Our students are the same. We need to give them the prompts, give them those 6 to 8 discussion questions, give them those roles and scenarios they've got to play out. So those are the kinds of things that I want you, a debate as well. Give them divide your class up, give the side, you're pro this, you're against this. These are some of the discussion points. Prepare your ideas for 5 minutes, and then we'll have a 10 to 15-minute debate. So those are just some examples that you can go with. I hope that helps. All right, I'm just working through these. Ida, you've asked a question, is the teacher's instruction the purpose to reach with the lesson? I'm not so sure what you mean here. If you could just clarify that for me, and then I will absolutely get back to your question in a second. All right, so we've got a question. I'm not up to the assignment yet. Do I still need to listen to this, or will there be one closer to the time? I just don't want to forget this. Oh, you know what? You can stay and listen. But as mentioned, this actual webinar will be available forever on our YouTube channel, just a couple of days from now. So you can either save it and rewatch it. And remember, we've got plenty of other webinars that are very, very useful, not only for the assignments, but for your teaching. So please don't worry if you are not at the assignment yet and you fret that you might forget the stuff. You won't. We'll remind you constantly through these webinars. And if we don't have another webinar on this assignment anytime soon, you'll be able to rewatch this one in our archive. So don't panic, don't stress. All right, thank you for clarifying about the authentic text plagiarism score. It makes sense, right? So students panic and they're like, I have such a high plagiarism score for my authentic text. Oh no. And I say, well done. Your text is authentic. So absolutely. Let's just see. There was a very important question that I really feel I need to answer, but I'm a bit worried that I've missed it. Okay, here it is. Okay, can I pick a text from British Council? Okay, no. So remember, Hira, I'm so glad you asked this question, because the British Council, as I mentioned earlier, authentic text is text that does not come from an English learning site. So if your text comes from an English learning site, it is not authentic, right? It's created for English learning. And the British Council's content has all been created for English learning, English lessons, for classrooms. Cambridge, all their stuff, it's particularly graded for particular levels, which means it's not authentic. And you will 100% be asked to resubmit if your text comes from the British Council, Cambridge, Twinkle, I think it's called, I can't think of any now, but all those sites where you can see the text is for lessons. They even say C1 advanced class. Nope, that will not be accepted. It's got to be authentic. So go onto the news sites, go onto the history sites, the food sites, the travel sites, go into those and find material that is authentic. Think about an English speaker. I'm not going to go to British Council to read information. I'm going to go to a news site. I'm going to go to a travel site. That's where I'm going to find my information, right? A teacher looking for work is going to go to British Council. But remember, it's not authentic. So the answer is no. I hope that clears that up for you. All right. So the 12 words, must they be from the authentic article? Yes, they must. So remember, you're going to use that authentic article and branch it out into different activities, and you're going to pretend in your mind that they've already done a reading on it. So the pre-teaching of those words will have been done before, but we would like an idea of which words you think would be necessary to pre-teach. So to answer your question, simple terms, yes, the 12 items must be directly taken from the authentic text. The items or the vocabulary items that you highlight are words that you think are necessary to pre-teach. Now, the items you use for the follow-up dictionary activity, while they should also be from the text, they don't have to be the 12 items particularly. It can be a set of words that you found in the text, but not necessarily your pre-teach items. Okay. All right, just scanning through. There are so many comments that are not related, unfortunately, to the webinar about teaching and ages and so on. So I'm just having to go through these a little bit. If I could ask you just to refrain from typing things that are not related or not questions for the webinar, so that it'll be just a little bit easier for me to find the questions and answer them effectively. All right, would you provide us with a copy of this PowerPoint presentation? No, we do not, but you will be able to rewatch this webinar. It will be available on our YouTube channel just within a couple of days. And then there's a second question in here, I think websites that would be appropriate, such as all, gov, edu. Yes, if edu, be careful with that one, because if it's an educational site with learning content, no. If, however, it's a site about the general school system in another country, or a site of a particular university, then it should be okay. If you're a little bit confused or you're a little bit unsure, then yeah, send us the link. And while we won't be able to tell you that the article you're choosing is okay, we can tell you at least that the site is not an educational site. All right. Can I use previous papers that I've written? No, because again, you've created that material. When we want your students to be able to go online and actually find the material that you've used, as in articles, blogs, news stuff. So really things that the reason we use authentic material in the classroom is to give the student that sense of, I read something that first language speakers would read just for fun or for entertainment, and I understood it, right? So think about those reviews online, restaurant reviews, travel sites. Rather go with those than something you have specifically written. If, however, you've written an article and it was published online in an online magazine or something like that, absolutely, you can send it, and we can check it out for you. But otherwise, I would say just stick to the brief and go with an article that you can find on a travel history cultural site. All right. Will the webinar be sourced from the TEFL Academy learning site? So our webinars are on our YouTube channel. So TEFL Academy, we've got our own YouTube channel and everything, and you should be able to find all the webinars right there. Michael, if you get a little lost online and you can't find it, just send us a note, a message on tutor support, and we will literally send you the link to all the webinars. And then you can scroll to your heart's content and watch the webinars that interest you specifically. Okay, so tutor support if you can't find the link, and we will send it to you. All right, James, you're welcome. All right. Okay, so great question. Will the authentic text, I love this question. Thank you, because I forgot to mention this earlier. So will the authentic text file be submitted differently to the assignment? So when you look at your downloads, the files that you have to download in order to type your assignment on, you'll see that there are two files that you must work with. The one is your authentic text file, and the other one is your main template with all your activities and so on. The authentic text file, listen very carefully, must only contain your authentic text. And remember, that's why I said to you, a lot of people get spooked when they see that very high plagiarism score. Well, that's because the authentic text file gets submitted within one submission, but as a separate file from your main template. So remember, two templates: one authentic text file, which must only contain your authentic text, and the other one is your main template, and that's got the evaluation of the course book, that's got the 3 activities you've designed, that's got that second essay, and your bibliography. All right, so I hope that answers your question. You're welcome. Whew, I'm so glad I got to your question, Hira, because no, the British Council, fabulous site. I use it almost all the time for my lessons, but not when I'm looking for authentic material. All right, so I fear that my scenarios may, there's no such thing. However, yes, for the assignment, maybe so, right? So the follow-on activity needs to be within the classroom so that they can practice the English as they would in a situation where they maybe go to a business or something like that. So Michael, what I would do is I would create maybe a simulation task, right? So they would maybe visit a business, they would be given a tour of the business, that sort of thing, and they would maybe ask questions. So I would maybe simulate that, right? Come up with a way to simulate it or role play. They've got to maybe give a little presentation about a company they've started. I don't know. So I would come up with something like that rather than taking them off site. I would no. For the assignment, it's got to be within the classroom, because also the premise of the assignment is all about bringing authentic materials and the internet into the classroom. So all the activities are specific to the classroom, and also using materials within the classroom also. I hope that's clear. All right. Any other questions? Because we have 3 whole minutes left. Time has just gone by very, very quickly, but I really hope that the assignment makes a little more sense to you. And those of you who have not even looked at the instructions yet, or you're still sitting on assignment A, don't stress. It's always good to be prepared. So just keep watching the webinars. They help. All right. I'm just doing what I said I would not do earlier, and I'm going through all the previous things just to see if I've missed anything. And I don't think I have, but if I have, please retype the question and I will happily use the last couple of minutes just to answer. All right. Nope. I think we've covered it all. All right. So if there are no further questions, I'm going to then cut them off here. But if you do think of something a little later on, and you're very welcome. Thank you, Celia. If you do think of a question a little bit later on, please ask us at Tutor Support. Remember, my worst nightmare is that you're sitting there trying to do the assignment and not understanding the instructions when we could just, at Tutor Support, clarify it for you. We love answering questions. We've been specifically chosen for Tutor Support because we love answering questions. So please, 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 do send your questions to Tutor Support. But something else that we need you to do for us before you go, and that is to fill in our survey. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you would like to see maybe in upcoming webinars. Just let us know how we're doing. A little bit of constructive criticism, always useful. All right. So yeah, thank you so much for joining today. Please, just a reminder to those of you stressing that you didn't get everything, all our webinars are available on our YouTube channel. And like I said, if you can't find the channel, send us a message on Tutor Support and we will happily send you the link also. Also remember, there will be another webinar next week, same time, same time, different place, maybe different tutor, but just as interesting, just as fun, just as necessary. So please join. And if you can't, you can always watch them afterwards. All right. So thank you so much for attending. Here is the survey link, but I will also be displaying it on the screen in a second. Now you have my permission to go and weekend. All right. See you next time. All the best. And yeah, stay tuned. Bye.